Hello? Oh, I'm live. Thank God. It works. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another fan hangout. If you're wondering why you don't have a link to join just yet, that's because I haven't shared it yet, but I'm going to in a moment. Let me know if volume or video or something is weird. I'm currently doing this in my living room, so there's a bit of ambient sounds, perhaps. However, this the link for this to join this is going to be a bit different than last time, because last time we had a lot of people join and it was kind of crowded, and we can still do that. That's fine, but I am gonna limit the amount of people after a while. If you want to join this discussion, feel free to click the link that should appear in the description. If it does not, I'm sorry, and I'm just going to link it in the chat in a bit. But before I do any of that, before I start doing any of that, actually, I do want to say a couple of words. First of all, I have to share the video on my social media, because that's what people do. That's what you do to promote. If you don't do that, you're not doing your job. Okay, so this is this time, and you're always welcome to join in the chat. This is also hanging out, and I try to respond to everyone saying anything in the chat. And if I can't do that, you should know that I'm at least trying to say hi. Okay, so this video, first of all, is a bit delayed. This video was supposed to come out this on Monday, but Monday was a Monday, and that's not really the best time to do a to do a video or to do a stream where people we want to hang out and talk and everything like that. It's not really the best time to do that. And also I did a bunch of things for charity this weekend, and that also took up some time, which means that after a while I had just too many things to do. So it was postponed until today. Hello everyone. And that is why the video has this hangout has been postponed until now. But this is still happening, so that's good. I'm happy about that. I also do want to give a quick health update, as I do every video these days. As you probably heard, the video is still delayed. I'm sorry, and I'm doing some accommodations to kind of work with that. Specifically on my Patreon, I have a big thing there where I talk a bit more about how I want to structure my patronage in the future. And if you're a patron of mine, that's worth a read, because I'm going to change a little bit. I'm still going to do videos, and I'm still going to do content. It's just that I'm still getting back into it, unfortunately. Will this be like the last hangout? It will. This is just the introduction bit. If there is not a link in the description, I'm going to link it in the chat very shortly. And if you want to join, you are welcome to jump on in there. But if you don't want to join, that's fine too. Or you can join in the chat, and that's fine too. So I'll do like that, and then we're going to do like this, and then we're going to do like this, because I do want to introduce the content and give some news before everything starts going crazy and people start jumping into this conversation, because it's live. Yes. So the topic for today, which is I want to have something that is topical for the month that has been, and the month of October has been not that great when it comes to specific news. And the topic for today was gonna be Saudi Arabia. I'm talking about Saudi Arabia. I'm talking about not specifically the recent things that they have done, because I don't I want to take the news that has been the last month, and I kind of want to spin off from that and talk about some like a larger issue at hand. So when I want to talk about Saudi Arabia, for example, I don't really want to talk about the recent news and the execution of a journalist and the crackdown of dissent and everything like that. But I do kind of want to talk about the absurdity of there still being a monarchy, a monarchist state that is arguably one of the modern day, maybe not great powers. That depends on how you define a great power, right? But at least like a very significant power in the world, definitely comparable to other important countries in the world, like Germany, France, the United States, Russia, and I think Saudi Arabia is definitely up there. And I kind of want to talk about the absurdity that one of those is just a flat out like monarchy, which is weird. And kind of how the Western world has kind of turned a blind eye to that because they've played the game, right? Saudi Arabia has definitely played the game. But let's talk about that more in a bit. Apparently there are 10 viewers. Hello, 10 viewers. I haven't promoted this on my main channel, so I'm pretty happy about that. So if you want to join, that's the link. If we become too many and it becomes hard to talk about anything, then I'm gonna start kicking people. I'm probably gonna say hi, or let you know beforehand. But no hard feelings. But if we end up like 13 people, I'm gonna start kicking people. And we have someone who's joined the conversation, I think, or maybe not. Hello, Margaret? Or am I just deaf and can't hear anything? It might be that my output device is also a bit warped. So I'm not sure if I can hear anything, actually, that anyone else is saying. If people in the chat can hear Margaret talk, let me know. Otherwise, Margaret is in the chat. But the chat can't be seen, I think, on YouTube. Microphone problems. That's fine. I'm debating joining. I feel like I might have parlayed a bit much last time. That's fine. It doesn't, like, people can join how much I want to. And this happened last time too. Oh, that sucks. Apparently microphone troubles are usual. But I think that's kind of my trademark at this point. That is my brand. It's technical problems. Because nothing works whenever I want it to work properly. So I'm just gonna... Big floof. Gotta have the floof. If I'm not floof, I am nothing. So, Saudi Arabia. The crown prince, which is currently like doing everything. Or is it the crown prince? Is it Mohammed bin Salman, or is it some other dude? I'm not. Or is it the crown prince? Is it Mohammed bin Salman, or is it some? I think it's Mohammed bin Salman. I'm not sure. Hello. We have 2 more people who joined. Okay.
Hey.
Here we go. Hello. Hello, people.
Hello, people. Okay, yeah, I can see people now on the main stream. Cool.
Good. Okay, so. Okay, so partially I kind of want to talk about Saudi Arabia too, but I also kind of want to talk a bit about, not necessarily just about Saudi Arabia, but also a bit about America right now, because I'm hearing weird things coming up from America. And I know I have American fans, and I kind of want to talk about that, because that is, I'm hearing that soldiers are being deployed to the southern border, and I think that might be an easier conversation to go into, because that's more like closely connected to us.
Yeah.
Like, I don't hear too much from Saudi Arabia, unfortunately. I don't have many fans of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Let's dig into arguably the easier topic, which is kind of fucked up. I hear that Donald Trump is deploying troops on the southern border to deal with a current what is it, caravan? Or what is it called?
The caravan.
They call it a caravan. It's just a lot of people coming from places in, Southern America.
The former USCA.
Yeah. So it's just a lot of people. They go together because then it's easier for them to like get into other countries and seek asylum. They go by themselves. They kind of get turned back, or they don't get helped.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's I mean that's a very common thing, I think, but maybe it's not that common in America. It's a bit more common in like Europe and dealing with the refugee crisis here, like migrant caravans. That's a kind of a weird term, but the concept isn't that alien. At least not here. But is it super alien to America? Because I've been seeing people freaking out about it.
I think the main thing is the way they're framing it. The way they're doing all this on purpose, right? They want it to be framed in a way that seems scary to people, where they think that they're people, because they always obsess over this idea of people invading, people from other countries invading and just breaking in and doing crimes and doing harm to people. And there's a bunch of like, even when you listen to people like Steve Bannon, they talk about all these books where the main plot of the story, I forget, there's a very famous book that they always talk about. It's like Camp of the Saints or something like that. And it's about migrants coming from Africa to France in a caravan and on boats, and then they come and they're basically coming to kill people. And the main character stops them by killing all of them. So for them, this is like a fantasy that they have about losing power. So this plays right. So they're basically jettisoning this sort of narrative into the mainstream.
Yeah, the plot of the book apparently is that mass immigration destroys Western civilization.
Yeah,
it fits their narrative perfectly.
Yeah, and Steve Bannon has said that mass migration is Camp of the Saints. And kind of what he's saying is we need to do what the book said, which is killing the people. So it's very maddening that they're kind of taking, and these caravans have happened a lot. I mean, during the Obama years, there was an issue of unaccompanied minors that were being sent, and we kind of dealt with it. It was a big issue, but we dealt with it by processing the people for asylum, and people, it was handled. It was difficult, but it was handled.
Yeah, it's not like a new unique concept.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just about creating a scare tactic, creating a narrative for the midterms to try and scare people into voting. Really.
Yes. There's even been Pence tried to frame it as Middle Eastern people were infiltrating the caravan, and then there was someone from one of the far right site who got on and claimed that they were bringing smallpox.
Yeah, I've heard about that. I've also heard leprosy, which is it's this absurd, like it's really absurd arguments, but it hasn't really been discussed much here, or even like in news in Europe from what I've seen. But is it a big deal currently in like American discourse? Because it should be, right? Because the response to it, the actual response to it has been, what is it, 5,000 or 9,000 troops to the southern border? That's a significant thing. That's not a nothing.
Yeah, it is. I think there's been, at least in the circles of people that I sort of have been around, a lot of people have been sort of trying to undermine the validity of this kind of narrative, because I think correctly they assess that it's just being generated by the right wing to foment fear and demagogue immigration. But it seems like the right wing has been successful in pushing this narrative and getting mainstream publications to cover it, even if they sort of cover it in a way that's dismissive. It's still kind of promoting the narrative. Yeah, because even if you say, well, Trump said, like, this is the biggest problem with the media. What they'll do is they'll say, well, Trump says there's millions of migrants coming that are coming to, do whatever. We don't know if that's true or not. You decide. like, and that's the coverage, and
Yeah.
it's horrible. They don't actually present the truth. They just present both sides, and that's good for people like Trump.
And it's gotten so bad that my dad actually called me up a few days ago to complain that some of his coworkers want an airstrike to be carried out on the caravan simply from what they've seen in the news media.
That's fucked up, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's holy shit. Because I've seen like Donald Trump saying that nobody's from the caravan at all is coming in, which is the process of asylum. If we're gonna spin this into like a more abstract topic, is the concept of the right to asylum kind of being undermined, because it has been, right, specifically in Europe for quite some time now, right? And I can feel that, like during the Muslim ban and everything like that then definitely was undermined, but as a concept more than in practicality, that people might not see it as a right anymore. That the entire discourse of it has been kind of changed.
Like a few years back, actually quite a few years back, the whole thing was asylum only from people we want. But now it seems to be asylum for literally no one.
Yeah, but that's also, I kind of feel, a slight misrepresentation of the concept of asylum, right? Because I mean, I agree with you that that's what they're doing, but what they kind of want is like selective immigration, not asylum. Because when talking about asylum, you can't just do that.
I remember back in the Bush years, there was this whole thing: we should only allow asylum from Middle Eastern Christians, but not Middle Eastern people in general. And then Trump actually, that was one of the smaller things I remember reading at like the bottom of the news, was that Trump actually ended that practice just to ban everyone from the Middle East blanket.
We have a new person in chat. Hello.
Hi.
Do you want to introduce yourself a bit? I should probably ask that of the rest of you too. But you've been on the Hangout before, so. So Joel, do you want to introduce yourself a bit to the chat?
Yeah. What should I say? I don't know.
Oh, that's fine.
I just don't know what to say.
Oh, that's fine. You don't have to if you don't want to. Does anyone else want to introduce themselves? A bit late now, albeit, but still. Nah, it's fine. We don't have to do it.
Hard. Say, like, hey, I'm Philosopher King on YouTube if you want to check out my videos.
Yes, please do. They're all great.
Yeah, I'm just a random guy out here.
We're all just random people in this.
We're all friends, like Cheers. Everyone knows your name.
I think that's good. That sums everything up. Random people.
Yeah.
We need
for people who care about the world and want to make it a better place.
Yeah. We need like a bar or something where like all of the left tube people can just hang out.
Oh yes, that'd be great.
And whenever ContraPoints walks in, it's like Contra. Okay. That's a very.
Why am I doing this 3 days before I start a new job?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think, you've made a really good point about how they're trying to undermine asylum in general in the United States, because they absolutely want to deny asylum to everyone, basically. It used to be like, oh yeah, we'll allow Christian Middle Easterners to get asylum. And then there's even people pushing to like, oh, we want to give asylum to white South Africans or other, oppressed white people in the world. But basically, they think asylum is not legitimate, and they want to stop it every way that they can, even though it's legal. It's illegal immigration.
Yeah, it's one of the big Steve Miller policies is greatly reducing or even eliminating legal immigration.
Yeah, which is a very isolationist point of view, which I mean, like Make America Great Again is like America First, that entire thing. That is very isolationist. But isolationism, like historically, hasn't turned out that well for like either party. And it doesn't seem that, and like asylum, the right to asylum, right? That is a very fundamental thing, but it's also one of the easiest things to to change without impacting the current country, right? Because if you limit, like if you make the economy more isolations, for example, that has a wide impact. If you make immigration more isolations, that also has some impacts, but not as much. But asylum basically only negatively affects refugees who need asylum. Which is kind of fucked up. But it's very telling that this is one of the things that is coming out fairly early when it comes to actual reform to the system that I had. I'm kind of hearing myself double. That's why I'm kind of stuttering to myself.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Yay!
Everything works for once. Technical problems is
I'm
not.
sorry. As far as I can make out, we were on asylum.
Yes, we're talking about
Well, asylum in America, where it's becoming non-existent.
I think that's kind of the case in all over the Western world.
Well,
kind
I've
of.
got this. I've got the theory that my pet theory is that every culture is afraid of the way it came about. So the basically at the moment in Ireland, Northern Ireland, the Protestants. I don't know sure if that what the population is, but the Protestant population keeps the Catholic population, has historically kept the Catholic population down, lest the Catholics rise up and turn the table, so to speak. And again, you've got America, which is afraid of foreigners coming along and completely changing the culture. I wonder why.
Well, that's isn't that a common thing that you kind of hear sometimes when people say that, it's a common retort when people say that, well, America is a country founded by immigrants, and then and I always hear sometimes I hear right wingers say, well, that didn't turn out well for the native population, and now we're the native population. I
think the weird thing is, and it's not even hypocrisy. It's because that would imply you sort of. You said that the two are comparable. It's like, no, you came because you wanted to exploit the resources. They're coming and impose your own system. They're coming because they want to find prosperity within the system that you've created. Not you, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That the America's created. You know, so the two aren't comparable, and I don't know if they know that and they're just lying about it, or. That's a point. How self-aware are people not Trump? He's obviously not self-aware, but yeah, how self-aware are these people?
Well, there was the whole we want immigrants from the right places, and they listed Norway.
Yeah,
in the 20s,
fucking Norwegians
policy, something. There were quotas. If I remember my history correctly, there were quotas, and the quotas benefited places like Germany, basically the Northwest Europe.
Northwest Europe, but specifically Protestants. Way back in the 1700s, actually, you can find things written by the founder fathers about the blasted German immigrants and about how we need to build a wall made of brass around the nation. Because I'm seeing signs that are in English and in German.
Goddamn Germans.
During the Civil War, we had entire divisions that spoke German.
Yeah.
For the Union.
The German the German descendant population in America is pretty big, if I remember correctly.
Yes, and there's also, particularly after World War I and World War II, there was a very hard assimilation thing to try.
I can imagine.
My family did that. They changed how my name was pronounced. They played up the French part of the heritage a lot more after that.
I can imagine.
But
my family, my granny has a German surname, but surprisingly, that side of the family never changed it. Her maiden name is Maya, and no one in the family ever thought to change that. Even after Twilight was released, we didn't.
Yeah,
World War I and II, Twilight, equally comparable crimes against humanity.
Like during
No, I can't actually say that because I actually like Twilight, and I'm gonna defend it. And I'm gonna
not
make a
as-
video about that someday. One day I'm gonna make a big old stream for 5 hours defending Twilight because I love Twilight.
You're going to make me watch that,
Well,
aren't
not
you?
as
Yes.
bad in World War II. During World War One, there was also a lot of anti-German laws put forth. German language newspapers were banned, and there were attempts to rename things like German Shepherds to Alsatians, Dachshunds to Liberty Hounds, sauerkraut to Liberty Cabbage. I think Frankfurters to hot dogs is the only one of those that stuck.
It's funny. I
But-
still get. Oh, sorry. Go on. I'm interrupted. No. please.
So, especially, and also in the 1920s and 30s, there was the Red Scare about European anarchists coming.
Wasn't there that famous murder case where two
Yes.
Italian gentlemen were falsely convicted of murder or robbery, and they were put to death? And it only came, after they died, of course, it came out that not only was it not them, it really couldn't have been, like the Lorenzo. Was that one of the names?
All I remember is the famous painting of the judges attending the funeral of them after they had sentenced them to death. But there's always been, and one of the things we had to watch in school was this animated short from the 70s about the Great American Melting Pot that was a song. You can probably find it on YouTube, about how assimilation is key. And so a large amount of when they talk about it all is that the refugees coming from Central America won't assimilate.
Yeah, but I can also kind of like to connect this thing, like assimilation is a very complicated topic, right? It's very difficult to like, and like especially for me, because I never had to assimilate, right? So I don't really feel comfortable talking about it in this way. But it's also that assimilation is something that you can't control or really force, because there are many like cultural groups or ethnic groups or religious groups which have been like attempted to assimilate, like they've been subjected to like forced attempts to assimilate for thousands of years, and they haven't. And then we have other ethnic groups that have like willingly assimilated into other groups within like a couple of decades. So historically, the entire concept of assimilation is kind of absurd to think about as something that you can control, because it's just infinitely complicated to the point where it's not something that you can like theorize with really.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really not one to talk. All my ancestors who migrated to places definitely did not assimilate. In fact, I think I've got my granny, who's unfortunately very proud of this, told me we had missionaries in the family who left Germany because they weren't happy with something or other there, and went to New Zealand to be missionaries, and they sure as hell weren't assimilating.
But kind of to connect these two topics, also, I think that when we talk about like that, historic, specifically American, then the specifically American view on, for example, Catholic refugees or Germans or the Irish or things like that. Historically, that is something that probably had like a fair bit of merit, because Catholics have been historically in America, at least, not really granted the same right as Protestants have, or other like Christian denominations. Irish people in America did not have the same rights as other Europeans or Americans, or what they would consider to be American. But the laws, rules, and practice, and the norms regarding asylum and the right to asylum hasn't really changed from that. No. Despite the social circumstances that exist today are widely different from those 100 years ago.
I also think maybe there's also a language thing that's around it. I don't know if America's the same, but in the UK we've got this thing where asylum seekers and refugees are almost never talked about like that. Increasingly, the sort of the people who are very anti-asylum seekers will call them migrants. No matter what the situation, they're called migrants.
Oh yeah, but that's also just an attempt to put the onus on them moving from one country to another on the refugees themselves, and not on the the circumstances that have caused them to become refugees. Because if you say that someone is a refugee, then the onus on the problem becomes on the circumstances that have created the refugee in the first place and caused the dangerous situation. If you call them migrants, then it's like, oh, well, then you're just moving, and then the onus is put on them. And there are a bunch of these different things, right? Where it's this like connection to like old rules and praxis that really only benefit the people that you deem to already have assimilated, and by extension then is seen as more acceptable, along with this like demonization of the other, which is just a continuation of how it's always been, but kind of lacking the perspective of changing social circumstances, because some people would probably argue that people who are in those in the migrant caravan, or whatever you would call it, I don't want to call it that, but, for reference, the heading to America, some people would probably say that the social circumstances that have caused them to try to go to America are comparable or similar to those that made people leave European countries 100 years ago, when Europe was facing economic disaster and facing war. And just them lacking the clarity of history to know that, well, it turned out fine when Irish refugees came to America, or Swedish refugees came to America, and the same thing will, almost definitely happen this time too.
Yeah, but that's correct. The thing is that when they call them migrants, it creates the illusion of they moved to this country of their own will.
Exactly.
That's a lot of people say that all the time. I mean, at my work, and I'm very surprised actually in the recent election that the Sweden Democrats in my county didn't get more votes than they actually did, because everyone I'm talking to is to the right. I mean, I'm the only left guy on my workplace, for example, and they say no, they come here of their own choice. They are not fleeing from anything. So I think that's easy to call them a migrant, and they are moving here of their own free will.
Of course, the other thing is that always gets mentioned is benefits, and this is a source of, again, I don't know if they're lying on purpose or if they're just that misinformed, but people talk about all the newspapers talk about all the benefits they're supposedly claiming, ignoring that there's a specific legislation that passed in the UK however long ago that forbids asylum seekers from claiming mainstream benefits. I also wonder why they think refugees and asylum seekers are that clued in on the benefit laws of the countries they're fleeing to. Do they really think they've got a shopper's guide back wherever saying, okay, now if we go to this country, we can get these benefits, but this country has these benefits with this package?
It's the United States in the 40s and 50s actually had a, by current United States standards, semi-robust welfare system. But as soon as it became clear that people who weren't white would be on it, that's where you start getting the welfare cuts. I remember reading the transcripts of Reagan things where he's talking not only just about welfare queens, but strapping young bucks eating T-bone steaks on benefits. And you're just like, what does that even mean? But it's the idea that also another thing right-wing media does is that they actually horrifically exaggerate the benefits that are in place. A acquaintance of mine actually dropped out of college due to assorted circumstances and thought that he would be able to support his family and buy a house on welfare because he'd heard that on talk radio. And he was quite surprised that no, he couldn't use his food stamp to buy Jack Daniels and sushi. And it was, he actually had to go back. He's like, wait, I actually have to work. I thought you just, and like, no. it's not like that. That's what the people on the radio and on are saying. But in actuality, not only is benefit fraud really low, most of the people on benefits aren't on drugs. The drug test to stop benefit fraud was colossal failure. But they heavily exaggerate the benefits, and then they say the people who are undeserving of the benefits are coming to take the benefits, and they also widely exaggerate the percentage of the budget that goes to benefits so that they can get the tax angle in as well.
Well, I mean, it all comes back to money, right? That's the core thing, because they want to eliminate every single thing that could even potentially be good for people. But also when it comes to like to welfare, now I don't know how it is in America, but like in Sweden, for example, there are some benefits that are earmarked specifically for asylum seekers and refugees and things like that. But those don't really those don't really make they don't really make refugees a lot of money, and also you can't also take every single kind of benefit that exists at the same time. You can't apply for every single type of benefit because if you're on some, then you're not allowed on others, and that is also one of the reasons why they kind of like exaggerate this amount of where benefits go. But I kind of feel like we've sort of strayed from the topic.
Be honest, they're more like guidelines than.
What is?
So Saudi Arabia.
What is the wording of the topic? Remind me, just so.
The wording of the topic is twofold. Partially, it's talking about kind of the state of asylum seeking in America and kind of the militarization of the border, because Donald Trump is sending soldiers to the southern border, and we haven't really talked about that.
Yeah.
And also, if we have time, this was going to be the main topic, but I think it's going to be a bit hard to talk about for a while. Was going to be the absurdity of Saudi Arabia kind of being included in Western political canon, and that's being like I mean, sure, yeah, the Western world is doing fucked up shit too, but Saudi Arabia is kind of on its own level when it comes to crackdowns on dissent, free speech, and genocidal behavior.
That's
I honestly think that if we would see if we would see things for, if we would deem everything as hard as we did things that do actually deserve to be seen harshly, then we would probably see like Saudi Arabia on par with genocidal fascist states. But for some reason we don't do that, and that is also one of the topics. But it's going to be a bit hard to talk about, which is why we're kind of which is why I kind of pivoted into talking about the easier topic of militarizing borders, which is.
I can already imagine what a British statesman would say, and what a British statesman would say was that the reason we take certain tones with Saudi Arabia, or the reason we make certain allowances, this is the language I believe they'd use, is that this buys us influence. And the problem I've always seen with that, apart from the, just how messed up you'd have to be able to ignore what they're doing, is if you've got this influence, but you're never able to use it to actually discourage them from doing these things, do you really have that influence?
There's the obvious is oil.
Yeah.
Well, but that's the easy answer.
The U.S. sells Saudi Arabia our literal top-of-the-line military hardware. If I bothered to dig, I have field guides to tanks with users, and every brand new U.S. tank immediately has Saudi Arabia as a user before any other U.S. ally or people we ship arms to, because of the Iran counterbalance. The idea is that the Saudis are a counterbalance to Iran in the region.
Yeah.
Because of
we sell them helicopters, I think. I'm not sure what it is, but that's every so often British arms to Saudi Arabia becomes quite a contentious issue over here.
Yeah,
I mean, most Western countries are addicted to the money, the oil money, and they use that to get influence. Another thing people don't talk about is that once Donald Trump was in office, the Saudis immediately started renting out his hotels.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Trump Tower downtown has an entire floor owned by rented by the Saudis.
And they're just able to use their money to get influence with politicians. And across all spectrums. And so it's hard because then they say, well, if you're going to crack down on them, they're going to take away some of their money, or they're going to spend their money other places. That's a point Donald Trump made.
Oh, yeah.
He inflated the numbers, but the reality is that these defense contractors they absolutely love the Saudi money that they get.
There's also the memories of the Carter disaster. This isn't something people our age really, but older. The oil embargo during the Carter administration, for a culture so car dependent on as America is, has an effect on the older population that they don't want to do anything to jeopardize the oil supply after the 1970s oil embargo, even to this day, 40 odd years later.
I mean, yeah, and I think that's shared by like a lot of countries in NATO and the EU, definitely. But I think that a lot of people might not understand just how influential Saudi Arabia can be in just Western discourse, because we don't really acknowledge just how extreme Saudi Arabia can be, and how by extension that kind of implicates much of the Western world, not just in its own human rights violations, of which there are plenty, but also implicates them in Saudi Arabia's human rights violations, which are also plenty. If like many of Western countries want to like keep up this act of being humanitarian superpowers, which is what a lot of people think that Western worlds are, which is bullshit. But I remember specifically Sweden wanted to claim itself as a humanitarian superpower while still selling guns to the Saudis. We make a lot of guns in Sweden. We make a lot of weapons.
Yeah.
I think Sweden is one of like the top 5 weapons manufacturers per capita or something. Yeah. We sell a lot of guns.
Carl Gustav and the made up Lindstrat Corporation, which is used in a lot of books that doesn't actually exist.
Yeah. But
they're really good at like selling themselves in PR. Recently, I think it was earlier this year or last year, Mohammed bin Salman was going on a PR tour of America where, the media was kissing his ass. They're saying,
he bought himself on Time magazine.
Yeah. They're doing all this stuff, and then I forget the guy's name. He writes for the New York Times. I think it's Thomas Friedman. Friedman was the guy. He went there and he was like, "Oh, this guy, he's so amazing. He wants to reform. He's beautiful. I love him." Blah blah. And just kissing his ass.
I hate Thomas Friedman. I hate Thomas. Okay.
They're just kissing his ass.
We used to have automated Thomas Friedman column generators.
And it's so bad is that now after the guy tells their Secret Service to chop someone up, now they're like it's so sad what happened, because I really believe that Mohammed bin Salman is a good guy, and he really like wants to fight against like the extremism. It's like, what the fuck is wrong with you people?
Yeah,
like they bought it and sinker.
Yeah, I think bin Salman isn't like he's kind of the equivalent of what's it called, Richard Spencer, when talking about like forms of extremism, not in the same like vein, but kind of where it's like, or at least Mohammed bin Salman is what Richard Spencer wants to be, right? Charming, looks pretty good, is powerful, and is influential, and by just appearing as progressive and just appearing as a good guy, by doing really nothing, you can get the adoration of much of the Western world, really, because much of Western discourse is based on appearances and aesthetics more than actual like political changes and policy.
We've got an actual question. We've got a question here. Geshtin, apologies if I mispronounced that. Sure, the reforms must be nice, except that why did they imprison the women fighting for the driving right before it became legal for women to drive?
That's actually a really good question. And this is okay. Time to brush off my historian degree once again. This is a very common tactic for dictatorial regimes when they want to market themselves out to the world, right? But still want to keep control of their own country. So, and that's kind of seems like an oxymoron, right? Where if you concede to your activists, that will look good to the outside world, and you will be more respected for like listening to the people. But that will also make activists in the country feel like, oh shit, we can actually make change. And so the solution to that is simply to round up almost every single one who worked for this specific reform, and then do the reform anyway, because then you get the international recognition, and also the people will know not to fuck with you, because you might get the change, but you will not be able to take part of it. And while that is still fine for many activists, it's very hard to get like a big grassroots movement on something that you will probably not be able to take benefit from yourself. And that's unfortunate, but that's unfortunately a very common trick.
What was the name of that? The Russian interior minister who literally funded a moderate opposition, so that the extremists would be discredited. It's like Raskovina or something. I forget his name, but I remember reading that. I'm like, wow, that's the reactionaries funded the center. I think the centrist, center left to keep themselves in power by discredit. Just ridiculous.
It's it's this. It's kind of like this. It's kind of like a double bluff of yourself, where you can trick people who want the reform, that you're doing the reform. You can trick people who think that you're not listening to people to that. Well, hey, look, I'm actually doing it. Well, not. Yeah, you're getting your cake and eating it too. That's the metaphor that I'm after.
Yeah, I think the main thing is like the Saudis, the House of Saud wants the people who live there to know that all things come from them, and if you protest, even if you're right, you will not get it. You'll get it from us, from the king, and no one else can create change. And if you try to create change, and you're right, we will jail you, we will kill you, we will stone you, we will do horrible things to you, we will lash you. And even if you're right, it doesn't matter, because it has to come from us for it to be correct.
And I mean, I think it's kind of hard for a lot of people in the modern age to just understand the concept of monarchy, especially in Europe, right? Because we still have monarchies, but we have constitutional monarchies, and I've met people who think that Saudi Arabia, they're a monarchy, but so is Sweden. So it's they don't have to be like dictatorial just because they have a king. And it's like there's a very significant difference between having a constitutional monarchy and an absolutist monarchy. Now, I'm not sure the House of Saud is absolutist in the strictest sense of the absolute monarchy thing, but they have pretty absolute power anyway. Like, even if it might be another form of monarchism, the king still has the power. What the king says goes, and Europe hasn't even seen that, and like America has never seen that, right? At least North America, like the Aztecs, sure.
The Emperor of Mexico lasted what, 5 years as a von Habsburg puppet.
Oh,
and the entire country rose up against him.
Yeah, he didn't go that well. Like that.
As soon as Napoleon withdrew his army, he was overthrown.
And Europe hasn't seen an absolute monarch in 100 years, I think.
Sorry, quick aside, if anyone wants to read up about that, there was recently a graphic novel about Empress, is it Carlisa, the Mexican name of the game? Empress Charlotte of Mexico, and her life story. Just thought that'd be interesting.
Emperor Maximilian von Habsburg. Most ridiculous facial hair of any of the von Habsburgs, which is saying something.
I've seen the wedding photo. He was just awful.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think-
But like, and I think that when people talk about like the concept of monarchy, is that like even when we're talking about like a fascist dictatorship, right? Even when we're talking about that kind of thing, I think a lot of people, because we've seen fascist dictatorships in the modern age, and we still do that. And I think it's easier for us to see how we can deal with that, and that's why we see that as a more manageable thing. But we don't really know how to deal with absolute monarchs, especially not in the modern age, because that would basically be like seeing the Russian Tsar using Facebook, which is, we have no idea how that would be, and the only example we have is the House of Saud.
Well, Oman.
I think that
Yeah, Oman, but
we struggle with trying to figure out what to do with monarchies is, at least with fascism, when fascists rise, we at least recognize that that's something that's gone wrong. Whereas, while it's seen as an outdated system in many parts of the world now, monarchy is still seen as a legitimate system. So it's whenever a monarchy gets to sort of controlling that sense, it's not seen as something being overturned, it's being seen as something being returned to. And so it has this legal, I'm not giving it any moral, legal legitimacy in the eyes of the people who decide such things that fascism doesn't.
Yes, they have the appeal to the romanticism of the past.
And I think too, like if you're in any like of the the military establishment or the political establishment or like the news establishment, it's very easy to like. I can see the appeal of a monarchy because they have so much. These institutions have so much power. So like, if you're a reporter at the New York Times, it's probably easy for you to get an interview with Mohammed bin Salman and have him talk to you and get a really good interview and get some good quotes. And so for them, what they care about is having access to these people at the top who have power, who can make decisions. So, for them, it's good. If you're a military person and you're like, hey, I want to sell the Saudis on why their relationship with Israel is important, it's very easy to do that when they have it. All you have to do is convince the crown prince that this is the correct policy. And if he's going to do it, then it happens. You don't have to convince a bunch of people, or you don't have to worry about, if there's backlash in Saudi Arabia against their relationship with other countries, the Saudi government is just going to kill the people, throw them in jail, lash them, or do whatever. So if you're in these power in the power structure high up in Western countries, having one person that you have to convince of these policies that you want makes monarchy kind of.
I mean, yeah, it just makes. It just makes everything a bit more like simple. It makes things simpler, right?
Yeah.
And that simplicity is really attractive, and I think, and I mean, it definitely is for a lot of people, not just in Western world, but probably in Saudi Arabia too. Like, and that's one of the things that when people talked about, for example, like during the advent of modern democracy, of the advent of the liberal democracy, and talking about like universal suffrage and everything like that, that the people won't know what's good for them, and that this theory of the enlightened monarch, right? The idea of ironically the philosopher king and everything like that. That as long as we have like one person who knows what he's doing, he will be more effective than a committee of morons.
This was, I think we talked last time about the imperial presidency in America, the drift of power. I forgot to mention what's called in the Green Lantern theory in American politics, that anything can be done by the president if he just has enough will, and that any failure can be blamed on not enough will because of how some comic book characters' powers work.
Yeah.
And that the reason, so and then there have been some things recently about how centrists actually prefer a powerful leader than people away from the center to some extent, except so the idea of one person is very appealing to the centrist, at least the American centrist media worldview.
Yeah, and I think it is like, even when we're talking about even if we're talking like religious power or political power, which in Saudi Arabia is very like intertwined because the king is also the protector of Medina and Mecca, which is the two holiest places in Islam, and that's pretty important. And even if you disagree with the king on political issues, he's still the protector of all Muslims in the world. That's the theory, at least.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think there's a point where some people think if Saudi Arabia were to go the way of like Iran, if there were chaos there, that it could lead to a large scale destabilization that could be even worse. I think that's a lot of the reason why because I mean, like you said, two of the most important holy sites are there. And if there's political instability there, like who the hell knows there could be another war, a religious war over these sites for who controls it, like what faction of the religion controls it.
And also Saudi Arabia is we've seen already political crisis in Syria, right? We've seen political crisis in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and every single time it has gone bad. So, and I think that sometimes this idea that non-interventionism, which is in essence a good thing, and that I agree with, and one of my latest videos, I talk about maybe we shouldn't intervene as much, but I think that kind of leads to a kind of apathy also, that we can't do anything about this because it will make everything worse. Then let's not do anything at all. If we can't intervene directly, and if we can't change them to what we want, which is in general a bad idea, then we shouldn't do anything at all, and we should just accept the way things are. And that's also a very misguided point of view. But also, if we were to, and I think a lot of people still agree with that even if we were to do some kind of destabilization, because some people think that some chaos in the short term is better for long-term stability. That's a dumb idea, but some people think that. Even if that were to happen in Saudi Arabia, a Syrian crisis in Saudi Arabia would be catastrophic to a significant part of the world. And maybe that also factors into the reasoning as to why we kind of why a lot of people just accept the way it is, instead of doing anything about it, because
there's also, at least in the U.S., Jared is friends with the prince, so there's also that.
Yeah, that's another thing. They're all friends, and so they all kind of forgive the horrible atrocities, because they're it's the classic sort of conservative or person. It's I know him, so he's a good guy. He can't be that bad, right?
What's the phrase? He may be a bastard, but he's our bastard.
Yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah, I mean, I think that the relationship that the West has with Saudi Arabia is one of the most interesting ones, because I think that most people agree on both sides that they are horrible, they're repressive, we don't like it, we think that their values are antithetical to ours, but we still accept them existing because things could get worse. We don't know.
Because we needed additional support in World War I against the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
I think also the thing is, I mean, so you've got Iraq War was at least partly in oil, but you had him making threats to make waves within the region. You had, Iran, the coup there again because of the oil, whereas Saudi Arabia, it does very well out of the status quo. It depends on selling the oil, so that's never going to go away. And because it's quite not just happy to go along with the status quo, it thrives on it. It's never going to be seen as expendable as regimes in other countries have been. It's sort of like, I hope I'm not trying to sort of downplay it by using this example, but it's a bit like in, the Terry Pratchett books, where they don't get rid of the patrician because he makes it so that life with him flows so much more smoothly than life without him would ever. And that's sort of Saudi Arabia, I
mean, Saudi Arabia furthers specific Western interests, which are the interests of those who have the political power. Like it furthers the Western interests of those who, of Western oligarchs, basically the bosses of weapons manufacturers, the bosses of industrial products, and those interests are being furthered to mutual benefit.
When
But the
Saddam
interest
was
of liberal values and things and the concept of democracy is not something that is that is the price the Western world pays in order to get the other the more monetary benefit.
like when Saddam was our pet, when we had him do his war against Iran, it was basically the reason we came down on him in the 90s was because he was doing something we didn't tell him to do.
Yeah.
So
So the danger then, of course, becomes like, what if Western interests and Saudi interests diverge so much that it becomes like practically impossible? The Western world is already unstable enough as it is, and
it's not getting any better,
No.
Yeah, exactly. We do have a question, however. Sorry for interrupting, but we do have a question from the chat. How big is the influence of the ulama in keeping the country pretty conservative in Islam? The ulama, if you don't know, is the religious council that exists to advise the king of Saudi Arabia. Is there a genuine schism where the royal family is more liberal than the ulama? So there is this idea that the religious council is kind of more conservative in its religious views, which is a fairly fair argument, because that is what we've seen in many parts of the world where religious groups and religious authorities are traditionally more conservative. And in theory, you can't become the king of Saudi Arabia without a fatwa of approval from the council. But in practice, the council has never gone against the royal family ever, because the royal family has all the political power, but also has in practice the religious power. And
so nothing would happen if they,
we have the tanks, they don't.
Yeah, exactly. If the council were to oppose the king, which I would deem extremely unlikely ever to happen, I don't think that would end well for the council or the council members.
Yeah. So
you would be introduced to the bone saw.
What'd you say?
They would be introduced to the bone saw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
It's similar to one thing I found is Imperial Russia, where the Tsar controlled the church.
In theory, the Patriarch of Moscow would have some kind of religious power, but that never happened.
Yeah. Then, one of the reasons the popes were able to, deal with the kings and the Holy Roman Empire, and that they owned land. They owned a good, I think, third of Italy. They had the papal army.
Yeah, they are independent, and there is there's a reason why religious authorities don't do they haven't been allowed to do that anymore. Yeah, historically, people with political power has done everything they can to try to unite religious authority with political power, because if you can play those two spheres against each other, then you can maintain power forever, in theory.
Compare the behavior of the current Dalai Lama to the previous Dalai Lama, for example.
And we have a continuation of the question as well. Aren't the al-Shiak family of the Lama often linked by marriage to the Saud family? So they're practically the same from a strategic point of view. Saudi Arabia is a monarchy. The same political strategies that benefit monarchies exist in Saudi Arabia. Political marriages are a thing, and they work. And the interests of the religious council and of the royal court are practically identical. And so, even if there were a schism, I very much doubt that it would have any effect in reality, but there isn't really a schism because they agree on anything anyway, because they are the elite of another like sphere, because we have the royal court, which are very much elite, and then we have the religious class, which is also very much elite, which is also something that we in Western society have a hard time relating to, because priests aren't really the senators anymore. They aren't really the community leaders as they used to be 100 years ago. But that is still the case in Saudi Arabia, unfortunately. Not that there's anything wrong with the religion itself, but I don't like the concept of a clergy controlling vast amount of political power. Gosh.
So the other thing, if you want to go to the border, with the troops of the border, is that the U.S. laws do limit what the troops can do there. They can't be used in a law enforcement role.
Oh yeah, because the military is famous for following the law.
Yeah. So that's
as is the president using that military.
So this is a way to erode even more American institutions in one go. And then there was the executive order shenanigan, which is also related to the caravan.
Yeah, I feel like that's like the worst thing. Like this is the thing that's really scary about Trump, is like when he talks about getting rid of birthright citizenship in the United States. So because that's a constitutional question, but who decides constitutional questions? Well, the reality is that it's basically Justice Roberts and Justice Kavanaugh. That's fucking scary. I'll tell you that right now. Now, I don't know how they're going to decide that if it were to come up, but the reality is he's put in place people in federal courts that are going to decide on his favor in these kind of issues. And that's just the right-wing agenda. Like, it's, classical fascism. We get this business agenda that's going to allow businesses to do whatever they want. And at the same time, we're going to allow these right-wing, crazy, reactionary factions to get what they want because it doesn't hurt business interests. So if we confuse the two and win and have power, we're going to let both people have what they want, even if it destroys the country.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's at stake is like possibly there could be people who could have their citizenship revoked because they, just like their parents were from another country, they got naturalized, that they weren't born here, they're brought here, blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah.
And I mean, that has a profound, I know a bunch of people who could be affected.
And I think that when people talk about that specifically, I think a lot of people don't also see the full implications of it. Partially because citizenships might be able to be revoked because of that. But I think a lot of people will think that, that will just impact a few people, but that will also impact political actors like politicians and senators in local governments, probably more than in the federal government.
It also,
but that is an extreme danger to democracy, right? Where you can potentially revoke the citizenship of a politician in the opposition.
It's also a double whammy because the amendment in the U.S. Constitution that grants birthright citizenship is also the Equal Protection Clause.
Oh yeah, and they want to get rid of that.
So it's 2 for 1.
Yeah.
Do we think? Okay, so I'm probably going to stream for let's say 20 more minutes, and then the stream will have gone on for an hour and a half, which I think is fine. So for these last 20 minutes, let's do a kind of prediction round. Do we think that, starting with the border, and then we can move on to Saudi Arabia, to just finish that thread off. Do you think that, what do we think is going to happen from all this amalgamation of horrible things that are happening with regards to the concept of citizenship, militarized political civil institutions as the border, and also the police force to probably a greater degree.
Yeah.
And
depends on what happens Tuesday. If there is a blue wave Tuesday and the Republicans lose control of one or both chambers, then there's going to be the lame duck bill passing session to end all lame duck bill passing sections. They're going to work overtime over the next until the Congress are seated to make it so that they can't do anything. It's going to be the level of gridlock in the Obama years as McConnell, as it would be business as normal, would make it seem like business as normal before that level of gridlock. If they don't win, they're going to try and do whatever they can get away with anyway. But it's just going to be more gradual rather than them trying to rush things. There's also, Pelosi has said apparently that impeachment is off the table, investigations only. So there's that. And the troops have been apparently ordered to shoot if people throw rocks at them, which is very easy to stage into an incident.
Yeah, because that is probably the thing that's concerning me the most. Because I can see all the pieces moving together to kind of form a disaster scenario. Now I don't think that's going to happen, but there's a risk of that happening, right? And I think specifically on the Israeli-Palestinian border a couple of months ago, where things turned really deadly. Now I don't think that's going to happen as much, or maybe even at all. Hopefully. But there is a danger of that, right? Because if you put like soldiers on the border to stop people entering the country who want to enter the country, and even if a small thing might happen, might not even be intentional or staged or however it ends up being, or not happening, hopefully, that can escalate really quickly, especially when it comes from soldiers and not. And I don't want to give too much credit to Border Patrol personnel, but Border Patrol personnel at least have some training into how to deal with that. Soldiers have training in how to kill people. Like that is their literal job.
There's also the added bonus that apparently the militias that are springing up on the border are stealing military equipment.
Oh.
What?
Yeah. There is a militia group that patrols the U.S. border that is not official in any way, shape, or form, and apparently the troops that are already there are reporting that the militias are stealing the troops' equipment.
What?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's pretty scary.
Yeah, it's extremely scary.
That's terrifying.
Now,
I haven't heard anything about that.
The U.S. Army commanders in the area don't like the militia very much, so apparently they've ordered the troops not to interact with the militia and try and get their stuff back. But the militias are more friendly with the politicos. So then there's the fact the caravan is still like a month plus away. So we have a month plus before anything happens. Hopefully.
Yeah,
but
because that is kind of what's concerning me too.
And we don't want another purging, because about 100 years ago, the U.S. Army decided on their own initiative to invade Mexico. So there's a lot of, oh no, this is bad. And
yeah, because the forming of a militia seems infinitely more concerning than anything.
There are a lot of them spread throughout the United States, but this is one of the more friendly to the media ones. I think they had their own TV show even for a while.
Oh God.
There's also the fact that Trump has shut down the domestic terrorism unit.
Yeah.
So,
which is and also that's so fucked up. Like, I'm sorry for being aggravated right now, but that's so fucked up because we've seen, like, fairly recently, right-wing extremist terrorist attacks.
Yeah.
In America. And
to be fair, the left in our country has been completely cowardly on the issue. They don't have the balls to just say, yes, you guys on the right are terrorists, and we're going to get the terrorists out of our fucking country. So the problem was that the first report came out under Obama. It was like 2009 or something like that. And the right wing freaked out because they knew that it was looked bad for them. And so Obama buried it, unfortunately. And now that Trump is in power, he's not only just buried it, but he's kind of, rhetorically helped them. And, we see Charlottesville and all the other killings that are happening.
But also, like, dog whistling about Jewish people did days after a massacre in a synagogue.
Yeah,
And it's absurd to me that, like, the president does that, or that the president doesn't take every action possibly imaginable to avoid even that someone could even consider that he was in league with that, and he brazenly, openly uses dog whistling tactics, and it's like victim shames the victim of this, and does nothing to work against that.
I don't think.
Sorry, this is not related to the topic. I'm very
I don't
upset.
think any of the militias have been punished since the Huttery around 2010. So, and even then, they got off on a they got off because of the judge. But
so Trump has one thing that he regrets during his entire presidency. The one thing that he regrets was that after he gave the both sides comment, that he apologized. He said that was the one thing he regretted, was that he apologized for saying both sides for Charlottesville. He said, I should have never said that. I should have just stuck with what I said. So he doesn't give a fuck. I mean, and he actively is helping to foster this hate in the country. Absolutely. And, you know, I think that the left, if we take power, this is going to have to be something that they're going to have to be strong about, is like, there are far right-wing terrorist groups in America. They're a huge problem, and we're going to root them out. And we haven't done that because they're afraid of Fox News and all these other, you know, right-wing media organizations attacking them for being politically biased. But in reality, there is a strong right-wing contingent that needs to be rooted out in this country.
Oh yeah, but and even like
there was,
if we're gonna predict how that's gonna be, I think that, like, even if the left does, like, see significant amount of power, the left wouldn't really, like, the left. I say Democrats. Democrats. Democrats would I think Democrats would probably benefit more as a party, as a political institution, from not doing that, like from trying to maintain a kind of balanced narrative-ish. But I think that's changing slowly. But I don't think it's going to happen fast. But I think it's happening too slow for it to actually be too impactful.
Two Democrat senators have already said they don't want the caravan here. I think Manchin and McCaskill, who's up for re-election. Oh, and then there was that was also in the news yesterday. The Washington representative who drew up his genocide manifesto. So that was fun.
Wait, what?
Oh, it was in state government, but a Republican in the Washington state government drew up a non-Christian genocide manifesto, and
I mean, we have some very active white supremacists now, like Steve King from Iowa. He's a white supremacist, 100%. He endorsed Faith Gouldy. It's like, why the fuck did he endorse her? Oh, by the way, that's right. She said the 14 words. She's a white supremacist.
Like Steve Scalise, who's the Republican whip in my home state where I don't live anymore, he advertised himself as David Duke without the baggage. And then in 2009, 2010, a few years into the Obama administration, the Huttery Christian terrorist group tried to take over a town but failed. So
I mean, this is not super uncommon in America.
This is not.
I mean, a militia took over a federal building not too long ago. I think
it's rare for them to reach this. Like back in the 90s, there were clinic bombings.
Yeah,
but it's rare except for Klingschmidt, who I think lost his seat. There wasn't really anyone calling for this sort of thing who actually held office except Klingschmidt. And I think Klingschmidt's gone, I don't know. Because he was kicked out of the Navy before he ran for government for trying to exorcise demons out of lesbians. So
that's what I call oral sex.
Yeah. So Klingschmidt,
I'm sorry.
and he managed to get a seat in Colorado in the state government. But this is still, the state government people tend to be much more extreme than the national government people. Like at the national level, if you called for the abolition of libraries, you would be laughed at. And as Someone did in a column, for example, earlier this year, call for the abolition of, and he had to retract his column. But at the state government level, you might get mildly laughed at, but you keep your seat because, and I quote, homeless people are going to the library to look at pictures of drugs on the internet. So,
sorry, what?
Mississippi.
That's how I take all my drugs.
He also rambled that people were going to the library to learn English from the multilingual section.
But isn't that what they?
This is what they complain about. Yes.
That they don't speak English.
Yes.
But they shouldn't.
Yeah. So state and local government tends to have extremists.
Yeah.
And because they don't reach national attention, and local media is a lot less effective than the national media, which is saying something, they don't suffer any consequences unless they try to run for a national position.
Yeah. Sweden has the same I think a lot of countries have the same problem.
Yeah. Or if they were dumb enough to post their manifesto.
Yeah. But I think a lot of countries that have this like political divisions between local and like statewide or federal like political groupings, which like most countries do have. I think they have this problem too, because like even here in Sweden we have like in a nationwide setting, you rarely have people from like from the right-wing Swedish Democrats talking about like how Muslim is a cancer or how Muslims aren't fully human. But in local government, you get that. Like that is an actual scandal that did happen, where someone talked about how you were either like a human or a Muhammad, which is like incredibly racist. But that's just what you can kind of get away with in local government.
Because
local governments don't really care that well. I mean, they care as much, but it doesn't. It's a smaller pool of people that can have an outcry against something, which means that it will seem to be less important than any issue that is nationwide.
Like during the Obama years, a lot of local governments passed laws that said that if Obama banned guns, that they would nullify it, and quite a few passed a state constitutional right to hunting. So local governments do this sort of thing and just sort of fades into the background as local doing their thing. And
yeah, and plus America is a very big country compared to like a lot of other Western countries. I think America is the biggest one, and with 50 states and other areas, there's a lot of local news that I think rarely can just pierce through the mass of potential news. Like even if people were to report on really controversial things, like it wouldn't like that would there would be too much.
It also doesn't help that the Sinclair Group has been buying up most of local media.
Oh God, yeah.
I think they've almost reached the legal limit, so it's up to the anti-net neutrality guy to decide if he's going to enforce that.
Oh yeah, that's going to be good.
They're the ones who make the anchors read the pro-Trump manifestos on air, or they lose their jobs.
Yeah.
So local news is going to call them out even less than usual.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's real scary.
Yeah, and since most of policy is made on the local level,
yeah,
that is potentially disastrous.
For once, I get to be the one to say we have veered slightly off topic. So
that's true. That is what will usually happen on my streams. Usually,
my prediction if anyone wants to hear it.
I blame Christopher personally.
Things are usually my fault.
Sorry.
I sort of think that the troops to the border thing, like a lot of the stuff that he's doing is just election sort of engineering, trying to create these narratives to get people scared and pissed off and angry so that they vote for Republicans. I think so. The problem, I don't think that the troops on the border is the problem. The problem is that they already have a family separation policy in place. Like that's already bad. Like that's already bad. Like so they'll get there and maybe they'll just take their kids or whatever. Like that might be what's actually going to happen. So they're already undermining asylum in every way that they possibly can. So I don't really think that they're going to like send troops to kill people. Like still thousands of miles away. So yeah, I suspect it's more of like an engineering a narrative because the elections are very soon.
Yeah, it's the aesthetics of of dealing with an issue that doesn't really need to be dealt with.
Yeah, because like they've been good at generating this hype and it's scaring people and they're pissed off and maybe they're going to get more votes.
The troika of terror.
Yeah, I do think that they're going to lose the House. They'll probably keep the Senate, but they'll lose the House. And yeah, there'll probably be a lot of investigations. I think Nancy Pelosi is saying right now that Trump will not be impeached, but they're just saying that now because when they're in power, I think there's going to be a lot of strong calls for him to be impeached. I suspect that he will be impeached but not removed. I think that is probably going to be the end result for Trump. Just because like the people that are going to be in power in the House, like if you just have a straight line vote, they would vote to impeach him. So I suspect that that probably will happen eventually because he's just going to do a number of things that are so bad that he's going to just almost force them to do it. And I think want that. The Trump people, the people that are going to run his 2020 campaign, they want him to have an actual opposition because they don't give a shit about the Republican Party. They don't care about any of that. They hope the Republican Party dies, but they want Trump to win and succeed, even if it means destroying the country, destroying the party, destroying everything. So I think that Democrats will win. The border won't be a real problem. The problem is going to be that this administration systematically discriminates against people that are seeking refugee status. I do think that the citizenship stuff could be a bigger problem, but I think that Justice Roberts is going to he's basically become the swing vote on the Supreme Court, which is scary. But like one thing to keep in mind is that he voted in favor of Obamacare because he was afraid of the court seeming too political. So I think there are certain issues where even someone like himself is not going to allow things that are that overtly bad to happen, because if they do, the Supreme Court will be destroyed. And he cares a lot about the Supreme Court not being destroyed.
Yeah. That makes that's a pretty good prediction. And I gotta agree. I think that's the most likely outcome. It's kind of sad though that like the best case scenario short term is just continued awfulness, and maintaining the status quo, at least like for the short term.
I think the problem is that we are constantly expecting the worst and hoping for the best, and that's not really good. I mean, horrible things are going to happen, and we will think, oh, well, that's okay because the worst case scenario didn't happen. But things will still be very bad, but they won't be the worst, and that's not good enough.
I think that I have no idea what's going to happen to Trump. I really hope that Democrats, once in like a form of power, will, as you say, kind of like start taking a bit of a bigger stand. But I remain pessimistic, unfortunately.
I think my problem is that maybe I'm just naive, but I can't fathom why Trump is still the president. I mean, I was thinking, no, he will never, not even 1 year. And now, well, yeah, he's still there. Because, well, maybe I was naive, but I was thinking, yeah, someone will impeach him. He will not be the president for that long of a period of time. But I don't know.
That is tax cuts. I think, well, to be fair, it could be oversimplifying it, but I mean, his agenda isn't quite the Republican agenda. The Republican agenda is still happening.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, he'd have to. It's not just that he would have to make them look bad for the Republicans to dump Trump. They would have to feel like what he was doing was counter to their aims, and Trump is never going to be counter to bigoted rich guy,
Of course.
But also, I think that a significant part of that is also that Republicans. I don't think Republicans, as like their like Republican orthodoxy, like an actual Republican, not what we usually have now, which is just right wing, basically anarcho-capitalist in the making. I think I don't think they're super fans of Trump. However, if Trump sinks, he's taking the entire Republican Party with him. or at least like a significant part of it.
Yeah.
And I think that is scary enough for Republicans that like remaining in the status quo won't be positive for Republicans, but Trump failing will be disastrous for, especially now. Like, and the longer you go, the worse it will get, because the longer his presidency goes along, then the more entwined Trump and the Republican Party ideology will become, because Republicans will be forced to defend what Trump is doing.
The rhetoric in the primaries has already shifted to more Trumpian than pre-Trump Republicans.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think Trump really is the id of the Republican base.
He's
he's
the base.
To the base, he speaks for the base. There are other, and I think really realistically speaking, his agenda has been like, if you just look at what Trump has done for what a Republican would want, they got 2 Supreme Court picks that are far right maniacs. They got like over 30 federal judges. These are lifetime appointments. Some of those are even more important than Supreme Court picks, because sometimes they rule on things that don't even go to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is extremely important. Plus they got the tax cuts. Plus they got all this other deregulation, and they allowed people to pollute.
The EPA's almost dead.
Yeah. They gutted the EPA. They gutted all these administrations. So I mean, he's point on. And I mean, a lot of these Republicans get fired up by the crazy racist conspiratorial rhetoric. He understands that the Republican base is an infusion of Fox News and Alex Jones. You put them together, and you have the Republican.
They don't actually care about Burke and etc. that you see in David Brooks' columns. That's not the Republican base. That's what the Republicans play on TV.
Exactly. It's not about some old guy from like the 1850s talking about republicanism and no. It's about I'm afraid of losing power. I watch Fox News and I'm crazy, and I also watch Alex Jones. I mean, that's really what it is. Like, and you fuse that together. Like, truth doesn't matter. I mean, these are the most postmodern people in the world. It's ironic. Truth does not matter at all to them. It's all about creating a narrative that fits their worldview and then running with it.
And how are these the same people who say that facts don't care about your feelings, and then they don't care about facts at all?
Because the idea of kind of like subjective reality, like Newt Gingrich actually said that his feelings trumped your facts. It's people who aren't us's feelings don't matter.
Yeah.
And people who aren't us's facts are obvious propaganda.
Yeah.
Like this is why you get people who think George Soros was a Waffen-SS officer during World War II.
Crazy.
Yeah, facts don't matter. History doesn't exist.
Don't you know George Soros is funding all of our transitions?
It's true.
Yeah, that was
the street.
I'm getting
every single one of my patrons is George Soros.
George Soros. I can't wait.
Wouldn't it be amazing though if like the conspiracy theory was true and George Soros did actually fund like me or pay me?
So much more laser hair removal right now.
If I had all the shill books I've been accused of having, probably would have retired by now.
Yeah. We'd have so much money we'd become Republicans.
Too is like, so there's a new guy. His name's Tom Steyer. He's from California. He's like a venture capitalist, rich guy, but he's very progressive, and he's backing a lot of very progressive candidates. And he's like the real deal. And he actually funds left-wing progressive candidates and left-wing organizations. They don't really talk about him very much because he's a very white American dude.
Yeah, he's not a globalist.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And it's funny that they always attack George Soros, and it always works. But they kind of talk about Tom Steyer, but it doesn't work. It actually doesn't attack him because he's a very American kind of guy.
And also, and
it's about the globalists in triple parentheses.
Yeah, of course. That's the real issue.
What's disgusting is that they continue to attack George Soros with these anti-Semitic dog whistles, the Republicans, and they even after all this shit, they sent the bombs to all the left-wing people, and the synagogue got attacked. They still refuse to stop the anti-Semitic dog whistling.
Yeah, there's been so much shit going on about this that I kind of forgot about the bombs.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
There's been so many awful things that. Oh yeah, right. Someone sent bombs to a bunch of left-wing people.
It's too much right now.
It's too much. Okay, so let's go into the final stretch. Predictions about Saudi Arabia. But I cannot specifically about this, because a lot of people have been asking, like, will this murder of a journalist be the final straw?
No.
Probably not.
No, I don't. I agree. I don't think so either.
The only thing is either Saudi Arabia runs out of oil, or the world has weaned itself off oil.
I think the former is going to happen first.
Yeah, and they go back to how they were before 1936.
Yeah, I think the thing about Saudi Arabia is they have all the right allies. They're really they have really strong military alliances with Israel. They have really good military and other alliances with the United States, United Kingdom. All these major countries want to have the government exist. They're willing to overlook the fact that 15 of the 19 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia because they are on our side. Yeah. When we come to them and say, hey, you guys did this, like, that's kind of messed up. They say, oh, okay, well, we'll give you money and we'll buy more tanks.
The oil comes back to the money.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That is absolutely right. It all comes back to the money, and they're funneling the money into the right places with the right people, and they have the right influence. And I think that's the thing that the Saudis have been really, really good at, is that they get into the levers of power. Whoever it is, doesn't matter, left or right, Republican, Democrat, Labor, Conservative, they get into the levers of power. They attach themselves to those people. They make it so that those people want the Saudi regime to stay in place. And they just perpetuate themselves.
Yeah. And you're sending a message to all the totalitarian states in the world. Well, you can be a totalitarian dictatorship. You can kill people and all that kind of things, but don't be poor.
Yeah, and be on our side.
You can do, and this is sending a very clear message to Saudi Arabia that, well, you can get away with money. I'm sorry, you can get away with murder because you have money and you have oil, and there are a lot of people who can, like, make money off of you. So yeah, just do it. Yeah, no problem.
Do we think that? Yeah, I gotta kind of agree with what you said before. That, like, I think that probably the thing that's probably gonna break. There's gotta be the tipping point, right? It's probably Saudi Arabia just either running out of resources to sell, or having some kind of major political shift in the way of that will also impact those same natural resources. But let's quit with a question before we end. If Trump is impeached, that will probably leave Pence in power, right? Do we think that he's going to be worse than Trump, or do we think that Trump somehow is actually smart to have a consistent ideology? Because Pence does. Pence has an ideology, and he's fervent about it.
Pence is better at not appearing to be a demagogue.
Yeah.
Pence will get the business as usual branch of the Democrats. Pence will, the media, for the extent that they freak out at Trump, Pence will calm them down while having an agenda that in some ways would probably be more extreme than Trump's.
So that's worse. I mean, it has to be.
I actually don't think that Pence is worse. So the thing about Pence is that, yeah, he's smarter. He's less of a demagogue. I think people like Pence are actually easier to beat, and that's what's actually more important.
Yeah.
What's scary is that people like Trump. That's the scary thing. People like the demagoguery. People like the over-the-top rhetoric. People don't mind someone who says and does the type of things that Trump does. What they actually, the problem is, like, things can happen where Trump can still win, and he's still Trump, and he's still doing worse things, I think. With Pence, you're gonna get like George Bush Republican light, or at least George Bush before the war.
Yeah.
Very, very milquetoast, very easily beatable by an actual progressive.
Yeah. There was
situations where people actively want, like, people that are like centrists and normal people could actively want a Trump who's going to be reelected. But if it's like Pence versus progressive, I don't think people are going to be like, I want this, hoity-toity 1950s conservative dad, crazy guy. Like,
yeah, he's not attractive to the aesthetic of right-wing extremism as Trump is, because Trump is very, I hate to say this, meme friendly.
The right wing, like these guys like Bolsonaro and in the Philippines, they create a fervor. The right wing populism creates a real fervor that connects with people.
Yeah,
So I think
Really
it's easier to
Yeah.
get people to vote for you if they're really angry about something else.
the
Yeah.
question there is, does Trump, so to speak, end with Trump? In that, is so much of what's happening with the right now that has become embodied in Trump, will that end with him? Can the Republican Party come, well, insofar as it has a place to go, come back from this?
I don't think so. The candidates in the primaries are starting to mirror Trump, and even if they don't win, it's still the internal party has shifted.
And
The base,
we've already
well,
seen like people
So I
like
be a lot
Mike
of
Huckabee and Ted Cruz
So
also like parroting Trump rhetoric.
Yeah, the thing is, there will never be another Trump. There will be Trump clones.
Yeah.
So Andrew Gillum in Florida is running against a Trump clone, this guy DeSantis or something like that. And the guy's a Trump clone, but he's not Trump. He's not charismatic. He's not interesting. He's not good at brushing off the racism that he's been a part of. And he's losing. He's losing. So these Trump clones, a lot of them could lose. And that's, to me, the real predictor. If Andrew Gillum wins, if Stacey Abrams wins in Georgia, if a lot of these people defeat these Trump clones, you could find that the Trump movement, the people parroting Trump, could lead to them losing, could lead to, in the future, the Trumpiness of the party being just about him and not really something that lives on. I do think that if he loses, that a lot of the just outward sort of hate will ratchet down, but I think the actual amount of it under the surface probably not going to go away for a long time.
Yeah. Do we think that? I mean, and that's the problem with a strongman leader, right? Because if you have a strongman leader, then that will be a very, very strongman leader, but there won't really be anything to replace that. But do we think that could the end of Trump maybe spell the end of, probably not the entire Republican Party, but at least like the current foundations of the Republican Party, as it would have to try to reform away from Trump or into Trump? Both of directions would probably shatter a large part of their base.
They could have a Mondale or McGovern moment, but
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's very hard to think outside of like what is going to happen after Trump, because I suspect that there'll be like Ted Cruz could run again. Mitt Romney wants to run again. There'll be a lot of retreads probably. I don't know if there'll be another demagogue like Trump. There'll probably be someone that'll run, but I don't know if they'll win. I don't know if they have the same kind of palpable populist appeal as Trump.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's very hard to predict, because I think that the demise of the Republican Party narrative is probably a little overstated, just because I think a lot of people, I think a lot of, like, there's a lot of overreactions to what happened in 2016. I think a part of it was that people have a hard time voting for the same party for president 3 times in a row. I think that's a part of it, and so that is hard to differentiate. Like, so that means that the Republicans will always. So if there's like a Democrat that wins twice, no matter who it is, that person is probably going to have a good favorability at that point, even if they're not a great candidate. So I think that they'll always have some viability, but will they have sanity? Probably not. Like that, the sanity, having a sane, like, normal conservative, I don't think that's their core brand proposition anymore. It's white identity politics, fear mongering, the Alex Jones isms, the craziness. And I think that's what the party is going to become going forward.
Okay, so on that high note, I think I'm gonna round this off. As usual with this Hangout, we always end with like, things might get better, but things might also get a lot worse. But I think that this has been still a good discussion, I think.
had let's see, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 European. Well, no, about 3 Europeans and 2 Americans talking about American politics.
All right.
We live in an interconnected world. This is where we're at.
We really do.
But yeah, like, you know, we also talked about Saudi Arabian politics, and like as I always want to say, like, I'm not part of American discourse as much as I am of Swedish discourse, obviously. So if you live in America and you have a different opinion than me, that's fine. You probably know better than I do. But I think that this discussion has still, like, if either talked about something or came to or informed something about something. Plus, it's always nice to.
Politics is that loud that most other countries do have a pretty good grasp.
Yup. I keep, like, every single American news comes up in my news. So it's the same thing if I watch, like, Stockholm's Daily News or if I watch CNN. It's the same news. It's all about America. But yeah, okay. Do people want to say goodbye? Because I'm gonna close out the stream in a bit.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah.
Support her. She's awesome.
yeah.
But she won't say that she's awesome because she's awesome. So support her and give her.
Pretty.
It's awesome.
How dare you?
Well, sorry, were they
Okay.
not meant to know that you're pretty?
It's a secret. But yeah, thanks again for joining in. And I'm gonna hopefully soon, because my life is starting to become a bit clearer now, but I say that every time. Hopefully soon the video on Sweden will come out, and hopefully soon Sweden will have a government that I can talk about. I'm gonna have an election update in a couple of days. Date is not completely set yet. And for the final bit of news, I'm also going to have a 24-hour horror game stream, because I made a bad promise on the internet, and you should never do that.
Is that when you were playing Dead Space?
Yeah, and I said that
By the way.
because, yeah, if you don't know the story, we were almost a third away from the goal, 2 hours remaining, and I said if we were at the goal, then I would play Dead Space for 24 hours, and then somehow someone donated 8,000 crowns.
Oh yeah, by the way, how much are crowns worth? Because it occurred to me the other day that
It's about £800 or like $900.
Yeah.
In one donation. This was the biggest donation of the night.
Wow. That's amazing. Awesome.
It's a good donation. But still.
George Soros.
God damn it, George Soros.
So
because of George Soros, now I have to kill aliens on video games. But dates for all of these things are coming up soon. They're going to be up on my Twitter and probably on the Patreon too. The election updates and the video game thing will all be public, so you don't have to be a patron. But my Patreon does have a bunch of news on it, so you can follow it, and you can follow that for free. Hopefully, my next video on Sweden will be up on the channel in the near future, but I can't say a specific day, but hopefully pretty soon. And also, for the final bit of news, there is a bit of news for my patrons that is you can read on my Patreon, which talks about a bit of changes that I'm doing to my patronage. It might not impact you, but it might. So it might, if you're a patron of mine, it might be good to read that. And I think that's all for me. So thank you very much for watching this stream. It's been fun. I always love doing these streams. And goodbye.
Bye-bye.